Andani tightened the straps of his worn-out sandals as he stepped into the school compound. The other students bustled around him, their crisp uniforms a sharp contrast to his faded, oversized shirt and patched-up shorts. He felt the stares, the hushed whispers, the stifled giggles. He had grown used to them, but the sting never fully faded. "Look at his shoes! They're crying for help," one boy sneered, nudging his friend. "Maybe his mother can trade some corn for new clothes," another laughed, and the group erupted into cruel chuckles. Andani clenched his fists but said nothing. He had learned that words were useless against those who only wanted to hurt. He carried his pain the way his mother carried her heavy basket of boiled corn, silently, with resilience. His mother, Mama Andani, woke before dawn every day, setting up her small stall by the roadside. The scent of boiled corn filled the air as she called out to passing travelers, hoping to sell enough to afford their next meal. She worked tirelessly, never complaining, never giving up. And Andani loved her for it. But the world was not kind to people like them. "Andani the corn boy," someone taunted as he walked past the classroom. Laughter followed, but he kept his head down, gripping his books tighter. He would not let them break him. He sat at the back of the class, listening intently to every word the teacher spoke. His mind was a sponge, absorbing knowledge, feeding his dreams. One day he would prove them wrong. One day they would see. As the bell rang and students poured out of the classroom, Andani remained in his seat for a moment, staring at his rough palms. He whispered to himself, a quiet vow only he could hear. "One day they will know my name." The small, dimly lit room smelled of damp earth and boiling herbs. Andani knelt beside his mother's frail form, pressing a cool rag to her burning forehead. Mama Andani's breathing was labored, her once strong frame now weakened by sickness. "Mama, you need to eat something," he whispered, but she only shook her head, her eyes filled with silent pain. In the corner, his younger siblings lay curled up on a thin mat, their stomachs empty, their tiny bodies too tired to cry. Hunger had become a familiar visitor in their home, an uninvited guest that never seemed to leave. Andani stood up, determination hardening his heart. There was no time for self-pity. He had to be strong. He had to keep going. Grabbing a worn-out basket, he stepped outside into the chilly evening. The distant chatter of neighbors filled the air as he walked to the roadside where his mother usually sat. He set up the small wooden stand, placed the boiled corn neatly, and called out to passers-by. "Fresh boiled corn, sweet and hot." Some ignored him. Others spared him a pitying glance. But a few stopped to buy, dropping coins into his trembling hands. He worked until his voice grew hoarse, until the last ear of corn was gone. Then he made his way home, clutching the small earnings like a lifeline. Back inside, he placed a small portion of food beside his mother's bed and gently woke his siblings, urging them to eat. As they nibbled on the little he had managed to bring, Andani leaned against the wall, exhaustion pulling at his limbs. He was just a boy, but he had no choice but to be more. Staring at the dark ceiling, he whispered into the silence, "One day, things will be different. One day, we will not suffer anymore." Despite everything, the hunger, the ridicule, the exhaustion, Andani excelled in school. While his classmates studied with full bellies and comfortable homes, he burned the midnight candle after a long day of selling corn. His books were second-hand, his pencils worn down to stubs, but his mind was sharp, his determination unbreakable. He dreamed of becoming an engineer, of designing structures that would stand tall, just like he hoped to one day. The day results were announced. The entire school buzzed with excitement. Danny's hands trembled as he unfolded his report card. His heart pounded. He had done it. He had graduated with top grades. His classmates cheered, celebrating their university admissions, hugging one another, discussing their new journeys ahead. Except for Danny. He stood alone, watching them, his stomach hollow with a different kind of hunger, one for opportunity, for a chance to chase his dreams. But university required money, and money was something he did not have. As they left, one by one, stepping into cars that would take them to a future he could only dream of, Danny swallowed the lump in his throat. He refused to let despair consume him. He clenched his fists, lifted his chin, and whispered to himself once more, "One day my time will come." The sun had long set, leaving the streets bathed in the dim glow of flickering streetlights. Danny dragged his tired feet along the dusty road, his basket empty after a long day of selling corn. His body ached, but his mind was restless. His dreams still burned within him, even if life seemed determined to crush them. Then he saw it, a sleek black car stalled at the side of the road, hazard lights blinking in the darkness. A well-dressed man stood beside it, checking his phone with an expression of frustration. Danny hesitated. Should he help? What if the man dismissed him like so many others had? But something inside him refused to walk away. Taking a deep breath, he stepped closer. "Good evening, sir. Do you need help?" The businessman looked up, his sharp eyes scanning Danny's worn-out clothes and dusty feet. His gaze held a flicker of doubt, but he sighed and gestured toward the car. "The engine won't start. I've been stuck here for almost an hour." Danny peered under the hood, the scent of burning oil filling his nostrils. His late father had been a mechanic before he passed, and Danny had spent hours watching him work. With careful hands, he checked the radiator cap and touched the engine block, feeling the heat. "Your radiator overheated, sir. If you let it cool and add some water, it should start." The man raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know that?" Danny shrugged. "I used to watch my father fix cars before he passed away." The businessman nodded thoughtfully and followed Danny's advice. A few minutes later, the engine roared to life. The man turned to Danny, surprised. "You're a smart boy," he said, studying him carefully. "What's your name?" "Danny, sir." "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" Danny hesitated. No one had ever asked him that with genuine interest. His throat felt tight, but he finally spoke. "An engineer." The man's expression softened. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, and handed it to Danny. "Come to this address tomorrow. I may be able to help you." Danny's heart pounded. Was this real? Was this the break he had been praying for? He clutched the card tightly, his fingers trembling. "Thank you, sir," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. As the car drove off into the night, Danny stood there, staring at the card in his hand. For the first time in a long time, hope burned brightly in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, his time had finally come. Danny clutched his worn-out bag tightly as he stepped into the bustling city. Towering buildings loomed above him, their glass windows reflecting a world he had never imagined himself in. Beside him, the businessman, Mr. William, walked with purpose, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. "Welcome to your new home," Mr. William said, leading him into a spacious apartment. Danny's eyes widened. A real bed. A desk. A bookshelf filled with titles he had only dreamed of reading. For the first time in his life, he didn't have to worry about food. He didn't have to wonder where he would sleep. He had proper clothes, shirts that weren't threadbare, shoes that didn't pinch his feet. His university was also far from his apartment. But Danny knew this was no time to relax. He had been given a chance that others like him could only dream of. So he threw himself into his studies, waking before dawn and reading long into the night. He devoured every lesson, every book, determined to prove himself worthy. Failure was not an option. As he sat at his desk one evening, staring at the pages of his engineering textbook, a thought struck him. This is only the beginning. And for the first time, he truly believed it. Years of sacrifice, late nights, and relentless determination had led to this moment. As Danny stepped onto the graduation stage, the auditorium erupted in applause. His name was called Danny Okeke, first-class honors in engineering. He held his certificate tightly, his vision blurring with unshed tears. He had done it. But Danny wasn't content with just a degree. He wanted to build something of his own, something that would change lives. Instead of applying for jobs, he spent months drafting business plans, sketching designs, and seeking out investors. His company started small, just him and a rented workshop. He focused on innovative, affordable solutions for rural communities, inspired by the struggles he had once faced. Slowly, his reputation grew. His first contract led to another, and soon, his company became known for building efficient and sustainable infrastructure. Years later, Danny Engineering Solutions became one of the country's leading firms. The boy they once mocked was now a respected entrepreneur, creating opportunities for others like him. One evening, as he stood by his office window, overlooking the city skyline, he smiled to himself. The struggle had been worth it. The waiting room buzzed with nervous energy as a group of applicants reviewed their resumes, adjusting their ties and murmuring among themselves. Among them were some of Danny's former classmates, the very ones who had once laughed at his worn-out clothes and mocked his background. Now they were here, applying for jobs at Danny Engineering Solutions, hoping to work for the renowned CEO they had never seen. Weeks passed, and those who were qualified got hired. They settled into their roles, grateful for the opportunity. At lunch, they often discussed their experiences. "This company is something else," one of them said. "I hear the CEO is a self-made millionaire, but no one has ever seen him." "Yeah, he must be some old, rich businessman. I just wish I could meet him, shake his hand. Whoever he is, he changed my life." Danny listened quietly from his office, a small smile playing on his lips. He had built this company not for recognition, but to prove that where you start does not define where you will end. One day, when the time was right, they would finally see the face behind the name. The conference hall buzzed with excitement as employees filled the seats, whispering among themselves. The long-awaited moment had arrived. The mysterious CEO was finally returning from his overseas trip. "I heard he's a billionaire now," one murmured. "They say he built this company from nothing," another added. The tension in the air thickened as the doors swung open. Footsteps echoed as a tall, confident figure stepped inside. Silence fell. Danny stood before them, dressed in a tailored suit, his posture commanding yet familiar. His former classmates stared, eyes wide with shock, recognizing the boy they had once mocked. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, with a calm smile, Danny broke the silence. "I believe we've met before." Jidenna and Ethan's jaws dropped, their faces pale with disbelief. "On Danny!" Jidenna stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan rubbed his eyes as if trying to wake from a dream. It can't be." But it was. Danny smiled, his expression calm and composed. "Welcome to my company." The weight of reality crashed down on them. The same boy they had mocked, belittled, and underestimated now stood before them as their boss, the man who held their fate in his hands. Their throats tightened, expecting anger, humiliation, or even dismissal. But Danny only extended a hand. "Here, we work as a team. The past is behind us." They exchanged stunned glances, overwhelmed by his unexpected grace. In that moment, they understood. True success wasn't about revenge. It was about rising above. And Danny had done just that. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories. Turn on your notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.